Good morning and welcome to another episode of OT Investigates, and this is actually going to be the final episode in the series I've been doing on the Last Alliance sourcebook I designed. In this episode we're going to be going through the two evil legendary legions I've managed to pull from the arbitrary canon of J.R.R. Tolkien. These aren't great. I think they kind of make sense, but they're fairly similar, and yeah, hopefully they make sense, but I'm not sure they're as compelling as the good ones, which has a lot more written about them. But anyway, let's jump into them. So the first one is going to be the minions of the Dark Lord. These represent the forces before Sauron comes forth from Barad-dur, and basically the ones he's sent to do his bidding before he goes out to join them. You'll spot there's three categories for the minions here, the troop types. There's the Mordor column on the left hand side, that's the red one. The sort of goldy one in the middle is the Eastlings, and then the orange one on the right hand side is the Harad, and I'll explain more about that in just a second. The army composition, you have to take at least one Mordor hero who must be your army's leader. I imagine this would be the lieutenant, but you could also just take a captain or a shaman or something. And then you may include one warband of either Serpent Horde or Eastlings. So similar to that Khazad-dûm warband I talked about before in the Last Alliance, the source material does make mention of sort of evil men being allied in, and I figured that would probably be Serpent Horde or Eastlings, so you can choose to ally those in if you would like to, and I think it would make a lot of sense to ally them in. So, the rules. The Will of Sauron. All models in this list gain resistant to magic. In the same way when I talked about with the Lieutenant of Barad-dur, kind of getting that resistant to magic with that sort of long-distance protection of Sauron. Same idea here. He's sending forth his minions, and he's going to try and give them some magical protection, even if he's a long distance away. Next rule, it's Unrelenting Hordes. Basically, you can horde out with this list. That's the idea. The idea is that Sauron, from Barad-dur, is sending forth these uncountable number of orcs to try and slay, the forces of good. And yeah, you'll see here you have larger warbands. Also, whenever a warrior model is slain, you roll a d6. On a 6, they can return from a board edge of your choice. Now, it's a bit fiddle with wound counts and stuff. Basically, I've said they wouldn't count towards your break total, so they'd count being as alive for the purpose of breaking, but they would count towards your wound total. I think it's Lords of Battle or something like that you need to keep track of wound count for. So that's what it would count for, just a little nod to competitive play there. Legions of Barad-dur. This is based on I think it's Gothmogs, the army of Gothmog, the army bonus they get, or it might even be the Blackgate Opens, where if you outnumber your opponent, you get, I think it's +1 to wound or +1 strength. I've said in this one, because you are so focused on outnumbering and you don't have many expensive heroes, that this is just +1 strength, but you don't include spear sports. So basically you're just be encouraged to absolutely hoard out and surround your opponents as much as possible. Final rule, mercenaries from the east. So these are kind of the elite troops that have been brought in by Sauron to aid his forces. The hero models from either Harad or the Eastlings, depending on which one you've decided to ally in, will gain +1 fight. So you could be going around with, a fight 5 captain, a fight 5 chieftain, like some actually quite nice elite heroes getting a bit of a fight buff in there. However, because they are mercenaries, and there aren't very many of them, they will receive a negative if your army is broken. So again, quite like mercenaries from history, if the army's going against them, they're quite likely to turn tail and flee rather than stick around and fight. The next one is Sauron's host. So this represents at Barad-dur when Sauron comes forth, that scene that's portrayed in the movies where he comes out swinging his mace around and absolutely wrecking everyone in sight. So you can take Sauron, Lieutenant Barad-dur, you can see all the stuff on the screen. You also take the Dread Wolves, which I didn't mention, which weren't included in the last one, so are in here as well. The profiles mentioned earlier on in the previous episode, if you want to go and have a look at that one. They're basically like a sort of more manoeuvrable half-troll is the way to think about them. But yeah, this is absolutely Sauron's sort of last roll of the dice, and everything's based on this one. And you can see in a second the buffs I've opted to give him to try and make him a little bit more competitively viable. Rules. A daunting foe. Sauron gets for combat each turn for free, and he can reroll wounds against hero models. This might be too much. It might be he should get like +1 to wound against hero models, or some kind of other buff, because this might just be a bit too much. But essentially, the thing holding Sauron back is that he's very expensive, and it's very easy for him to get tied up because he does only come with 3 might. So the way to get around that, I think, is to try and make him a bit more manoeuvrable, a bit more active on the battlefield, to give him a heroic combat each turn for free. So I don't know if that would be too much, but yeah, that's the idea, try and get more from that Sauron. And the idea of this list overall is that it all focuses on Sauron. You get as much power for him as you possibly can. Unending Cause, same as with the last one. You're again trying to hoard out, so warband size increases. This is actually included in the basic barad-dur thing as well for Sauron, so I thought that was relatively themey. And again, you bring warrior models back on a 6. It's worth noting this isn't always a strict buff. I think it's sometimes actually a bit of a nerf depending on how you're managing your breakpoint and stuff like that. So I think this one is relatively powerful, but actually only at very high points I think would it be super swingy. I think actually most of the time it's going to be sort of relatively, you probably can bring back maybe 6 or 7 miles on average, which is only actually like 30-40 points, which is kind of like a free Anduril. So yeah, it's not actually maybe as powerful as it does look. It is worth noting you could technically bring back the Dread Walls with this, which might be a little bit strong, but yeah, again, on a 6, not super reliable. The Dark Lord comes forth. This represents, the presence that Sauron has on the battlefield and for how he would probably inspire his troops to fight harder around him. So if he's getting tied up in combat, obviously he won't be able to use his magic, his free point of will every turn. So the idea was that he can instead use it to just become a banner. Now, I've written it as 6 inches. Might be that's a little bit strong. Might be that's actually about right. Again, if you wanted to bring it down, just bring it down to 3 inches. I'm sure that would be absolutely fine. But yeah, I thought push it a little bit because you want this sort of fully powered up version of Sauron that we saw in the films. Again, rule through fear. This is actually included in barad-dur. With a slight change, it's based on Sauron's wound count in barad-dur. I've just said as long as he's alive, they're not going to break. So yeah, doesn't matter how many wounds he's on, as long as he's still on the board, you're fine. And then super niche one at the bottom, a bit like with the ring race and the ring bearer, but actually this is probably even more niche because it's specifically a Isildur. If Sauron's slain by Isildur, he can't use the one ring ability, he's just removed. So if for whatever reason you do have that super themey moment of Isildur taking down Sauron, it's not going to be ruined by Sauron making that one ring roll, he will just be slain immediately. But yeah, idea of this one, you see a fully powered up Sauron and then just as many warriors as you can fit in around him to try and hold up on those objectives. Cool, well that's it done. Obviously, probably by the time I release this, GW will have probably released and, started selling the book and it'll be much better than this. But in absence of that, this is the best we've got for now. Hopefully all those made sense. I think actually it's going through this process has revealed that maybe putting together a Last Alliance sourcebook wasn't as easy as I had assumed. And I can definitely see why perhaps GW might be a little bit reluctant to do this because it is a bit finicky. It is a little bit tricky to fit all these different factions together. And I imagine they're a bit reluctant to release any new warrior types, any new sculpts. So it may be the case that actually the Last Alliance sourcebook isn't possible. But yeah, this was my crack at it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And yeah, looking forward to see you for the next video.